Mark was born, as is discussed in the documentary, he was premature. And that was a whole story in and of itself, overcoming the prematurity. And eventually, he was 1 pound, 10 ounces, I think.
His head was the size of a lime.
And, you did watch
And then the wedding band went all up to his arm.
He put it on his
that,
on the
to
leg.
me, I was like, oh my gosh.
He had no business surviving, and obviously did, and came home a normal child, as is referenced in the documentary. And there were things not right at some point. They noticed just developmental things that didn't make any sense.
And I believe that part where Mark was revealing that, everything he does, he needs help with. We all do. We all do. And it's a shift, and I don't care what your faith is. It's just a matter of us all being human beings on the planet together and being connected and helping one another. And
what if this person is like, can't people see that I could use a hand? It's something that I encounter regularly with elderly people, and I'm always hesitant, like, is it a slap in the face? And I know it just depends on the person. Somebody would be like, oh, honey, thank you so much. I would love your help.
Remembering that these people are human beings and, they value human connection, just like we do.
And I'm reading this text. It was that Mark had just passed away at Toby. And Paul, when he finally was capable of speaking, he goes, does this mean the project goes away? I said, no, on the contrary, it becomes more important and we need to get it out fast.
Hey guys, it's Seacoast Podcast, Joey Svendsen. Although you listeners are smart and can probably figure this out for yourself, I figured I'd make it easy for you and set this episode up some, because I know some of you are double tasking and concentrating on more than just this podcast. So here's the simple scoop. There's 4 people joining this conversation. It's me, Joey Svendsen, and fellow Seacoaster Mary Tutterow from episode 148 sits alongside me to help host. Then we have fellow Seacoaster and fellow staffer to me, Mady Glenn. So both of these ladies, Mady and Mary, are deeply wired to care and advocate for people with disabilities. Lastly, we have Ron Small. You'll hear how he came to care very deeply along these same lines. The 4 of us will be talking a lot about and referring to a documentary that Ron produced about Mark Bookman, a brilliant man who persevered through significant disabilities. He passed away near the end of the making of that documentary, but left quite a legacy behind in profoundly furthering positive change in society on behalf of the 15% of the population on this earth who have a disability. We also talk about Rachel Bookman, that's Mark's sister, who endured through the same disability as her older brother. And you're going to hear clips from this documentary, courtesy of Mark and his sister, Rachel. Now, Paul Bookman is their father. You'll hear his name quite a bit too. All right, I thought laying a bit of a foundation would help. Thanks for listening, and here's another episode on Seacoast Churches, Things You Won't Hear on Sunday podcast. All right, well, welcome to the Seacoast Podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, hello. We've got a full house in here today, and I just want to remind y'all, as this episode is releasing during the holidays, if you know somebody who listens to this podcast regularly, you can gift them a patron membership, and I tell people that every single dime goes toward our ministry efforts in local prisons. If you want to hear more of the backstory and hear from the guy who spearheads it, his name's Jim Wright. He is a marvelous guy. It's episode 137, When I Was in Prison, Did You Visit Me? And I'll tell you, last week you heard from a patron. We brought him in remotely, LB Dantzler. And he supports this podcast for $100 a month, but it's you can join for $10 a month, and there you get exclusive content. You get live feeds, as some patrons are watching right now. So we're thankful for those of you who support. Today, I am here to learn a lot. If you're from around these Seacoast parts, you'll know some of these names. So a little background information. Mac Mood, the campus pastor of the Johns Island campus, him and I came on staff. I think we came on payroll the exact same day and worked together. I was telling Ron that I was originally his boss, which we both laugh about now because it was literally the blind leading the blind. Neither one of us knew what we were doing. And so he made this connection. I'm meeting you for the first time, and you're on staff as well, Mady, and I'm meeting you for the first time. But how did Mac put all this together? And then I'll introduce Mary to you. But tell us who you are, Ron, and how you ended up in this seat.
Well, Ron Small is my last name. People still get it wrong. Small. You get Smule, Small, but anyway.
Really?
Yeah, you'd be surprised. And
Wait,
here,
it's
here in
spelled
South,
SMALL, right?
And here in South Carolina, everybody wants to add an S to my name. So I'll check into a hotel. Sorry, we don't have your name. Take the S off the end. Oh, yeah, there
Take
you
the
are.
S
There you
off.
go. Gotcha. So it's been some years ago. I produced a program about a local, we'll call him a celebrity, Joe Engel, who was a Holocaust survivor who lived here in Charleston for many years, had a dry cleaning business, beloved member of the community. And we did a documentary about him called To Auschwitz and Back, the Joe Engel story. And long story short, met the fine folks who started this church and was introduced to Mac. And Mac and I'm sure a fine team put together this event at your facility in West Ashley, which was unbelievable. The community came out. They brought food. They had just a switched-on audience. And it was Joe and I went up on stage after the screening of the documentary so that Joe could do a Q&A. I was sort of the translator with his thick accent. He told me on the way home that night, he goes, I can't do the accent, I never had a more amazing event in my entire life. And this is a guy who spoke for years and years and years to groups because everybody was just so into what he was saying, and it was an incredible evening. So that began my love affair with Seacoast, and then Mac and I have stayed in touch forever. And it seems like whenever I do a project that has some great community impact, I call Mac, hey, is there something we could do together? And then I met Mady on a Zoom call, I guess it was, you, me, and Mac, and it was like, wow, we're all speaking the same language. And Mary, I know from our mutual connection with the incredible Ann Lee, who started Darkness to Light here in Charleston. Yeah. So you're kind of the odd man out.
There you go. There you go. And I do want to mention, you and I were talking beforehand, and you have a podcast all about steak.
It's actually much more than that. It's an app and a website. Thank you for letting me mention this. Called the Steakhouse Hall of Fame. It's been about 5 years we've developed this. So at the very least, you get off a plane anywhere in the country, take out your phone, press the app. It'll say find a steakhouse near me, and you'll find over 2,100 of the best steakhouses in America. But if you're inducted into the Steakhouse Hall of Fame, which is prime beef, independently owned, multi-generational. Halls is one.
Yeah.
It's a giant placement with a video. We do a mini documentary about all the restaurant owners, and it's been the most amazing, fun thing I've done in a long time.
That is cool.
Yeah.
So fun.
So check it out.
Yeah.
SteakhouseHallOfFame.com.
That's awesome. I'll tell y'all.
Thanks for the plug.
Yeah, I'll tell y'all a funny story. So we were at a conference out of town. I didn't realize that this gas station stop was our dinner stop before going to the conference with the pastors. And so I skipped out, and then I realized, oh my gosh, we're not having dinner. I'm not going to be able to go to sleep without dinner. So we got back to the hotel, and I'm like, okay, where's the nearest restaurant? And I hope they're not closed yet. Well, I'd never heard of Ruth Chris Steakhouse, just never heard of it. And I know it's a chain, so it's probably not in the Hall of Fame. But I walk in, I'm like, oh my gosh, the customer service, this is amazing. Like, what is going on here? I thought it was just like a Quincy's or Shoney's or something. I had no idea. I open up the menu, I'm like, good gosh, these prices. And I ordered the cheapest steak on the menu. It was like a $50 sirloin. And I was like, I can't put this on the church credit card. But I was like, this is the best steak. And I came back and told the campus pastors, I just went down the road to this Ruth. You went to Ruth Chris Steakhouse? But for a steak connoisseur, are you kind of like Ruth Chris Steakhouse? That's a chain restaurant.
Ruth Chris actually started in New Orleans, where my formative years were. Okay. I went to school there. And Ruth Fertel started it. She was a homemaker, a single mom.
Yeah.
And she wanted a business. And she said, I'm going to get into the steak business. And she found this place called Chris's Steakhouse. It was on Broad Street, the original location. And they said, you can buy it, but you have to keep the Chris's name in the name of the restaurant. So it became Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. And it was a phenomenon. I mean, you went in there and everybody, every Politico, every celebrity, and then she eventually sold it and became a huge chain. And her son, I think, was the beneficiary of a lot of that. But yeah, it's the steak sizzling in butter when they come to the table.
Yeah.
I'm sure that was what you remember. But that was a phenomenon.
Yeah, I remember having to order the sides separately. I was like, what in the world is that? This is a good potato, though. So Mary, and it's Tutterow, right?
Yes, sir.
Yep. So Mary...
Talk about your last name being tangled up.
You win the contest.
Yeah. Now, I don't know. Svendsen, I get some craziness.
Yeah. Okay.
But you help bring the ministry here that you oversee currently, correct?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
why don't we go ahead and tell people what One by One Ministries is? I'll let you do that, and you feel free to chime in. But I do want to tell people that Mary... And I'm not going to give it justice. It's curriculum. It's you meet with groups. You walk people through the heart of a caregiver. And you were on episode 148. So I would say this is almost like an extension of that conversation. So if this, I hate just saying this is content, but if this conversation is interesting and hopefully moving to your hearts, I'd go back and revisit episode 148 as well. But tell us about One by One Ministries and how long you've been overseeing it, Mady. And I'll have to tell you that you win best outfit ever in this studio. I just love
Oh my gosh, thank you. That's a high honor. I love color, so.
Yeah.
But yeah, One by One is our special needs ministry at Seacoast. We have kids and students and adults with disabilities that come to our ministry every week. It has developed into, we have a special needs room or a room for individuals with disabilities where we do an adapted kind of curriculum, sort of like what they do in Kids Coast every Sunday. But then we also have a buddy program. So we have some kiddos who, and some custom students or some students in youth ministry that just need a little bit of support. And so they're able to be included in that way with their peers. But then for kiddos or even adults that are not able to be in those environments, we have a specialized room for them at Seacoast on Sundays. And so it's so much fun. We do worship, we do a Bible story, and truly get to see these people worship God with their whole hearts every week. And it's literally the best part of my week and the highest honor of my life to get to oversee this ministry. So
that's cool. How long have you been overseeing?
I've been on staff at Seacoast since the last day of June, actually.
Okay.
So just a few months, but it's been so much fun. And I'm just so honored that I get to do it.
We're happy to have you here too. And how long has One by One been at Seacoast?
Oh, come on. Wait, now, hold it.
She's going to grill me.
I don't know. I would say at least 15 years.
Yeah.
Maybe even
15
more.
or 20, I
Yeah,
believe.
15 or 20. I mean, did you ever remember Scott Kinney?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, well, Scott
sure.
Kinney, Jessica Surratt, myself, and a lady named Kim Gabriel
Okay.
got it rolling a long time ago. And actually, we had the first night to shine.
Wow.
Yeah, we brought it from a church in Charlotte.
So awesome. We're planning that currently. So
Awesome.
thank you for the work that you've done and the work that you did to get that going. It
Passionate.
is so awesome. I'm so excited.
Passionate.
And this is the only campus who has One by One, or has it gone to any of the other campuses?
So Somerville campus also has a One by One room, which is awesome. And most of our campuses have some students or children with disabilities that I actually get to provide central support to, which is so much fun. So I get to provide support to all of our campuses in a certain way. So, and just help them figure out ways that we can accommodate those students. So even if they don't have a specific room or specific space, help them figure out how to navigate conversations with families and provide support so those kids can go into Kids Coast or can participate in whatever way works best for them.
Gotcha.
It's super awesome.
All right. Well, sometimes the pre-conversation is a blur to me as far as whether or not it was on air. Have we given Mac Mood his due props?
Mac.
Yeah. So Mac helped put this conversation together. He met you for that event that you just actually told people about, correct?
Some years ago.
Yeah. And so you reached out to him. Was it specifically about the documentary, Mark, A Call to Action?
It was one of those things I just felt there had to be some synergy there. And of course, Mac got back to me almost immediately and ultimately introduced me to you, and here I am.
Yeah.
I have a connection to Mac.
Have at it.
In that when we started Healing Farms well, that was way long ago, but when we moved into the town from McClellanville, we had a little house, and we still do, in Mac's neighborhood when he was the head pastor at the West Ashley campus.
He was never the head, but he was assistant pastor.
Assistant pastor. Yep. And he would bring volunteers and stuff all the time. They were so supportive of our program for adults with disabilities. And so Mac really does have a heart for what is going to be discussed today.
Yeah. And a heart of gold.
Yeah.
Heck yeah. Yep. So tell us a little bit. I watched the documentary. It was, I think you know this. It was very well done. It was extremely enlightening. As someone who wants to learn more, I'd never heard of ADA. It's very educational, but also a heart-wrenching end. But you said that we can offer our listeners a link in the show notes.
Absolutely.
To people. So this documentary that we're talking about will kind of steer the conversation. But what we're going to be talking about, and here's where the education for me, it would be people with disabilities. Is that the proper way? And I know you helped me with this kind of stuff on episode 148, but is that how we should say?
In the documentary, Rachel Bookman, who's the sister of our star, she says, we are people with disabilities, not a disabled person. There's that justification. And so I think that's the right way to say it. Certainly, disability is the right word to use.
Yeah. Yeah. So is Mark like a genius, like literally a genius?
Unbelievable. You can't even imagine. That's part of, if you want me to tell the story.
Yeah. Give people a snapshot of the story.
A lot of people don't know this. Paul Bookman, who is the father, who's obviously throughout this whole program, was one of two people I met on day one of college in August of 1978. And we've been friends ever since. And he went on to become a dentist. And convinced me that I should study anthropology because he was doing it. I was a pre-med at the time, obviously took a different path at some point. So Paul and I were friends, very, very close for years and years and years. Mark was born, as is discussed in the documentary, he was premature. And that was a whole story in and of itself, overcoming the prematurity. And eventually, he was 1 pound, 10 ounces, I think.
His head was the size of a lime.
And you did watch
And then the wedding band went all up to his arm,
he put it on his
that,
on the
to
leg.
me, I was like, oh my gosh.
He had no business surviving, and obviously did, and came home a normal child, as is referenced in the documentary. And there were things not right at some point. They noticed just developmental things that didn't make any sense. And ultimately, he was diagnosed at around 10 years old with a neuromuscular disease that was very, very rare. But at 10, he also needed a heart transplant. And Paul and I had not spoken for a while because, with all due respect, he had a wife who thought I was a bad influence on him because I visited every year. It's a whole story in and of itself for another podcast, but they're no longer together.
Right.
And he raised Mark and Rachel, as Mark likes to say, my mother was all about keeping me alive, but my father was all about letting me live.
Oh, I love
and
that.
Mark was so brilliant at a young age, and Paul talks about it, he just knew it. And when you talk to this kid, the last time I saw him, he was 5, and I have video of me horsing around as Uncle Ron, twisting his arm and making him say, oh, Uncle Ron, the great, that kind of stuff. And then now these years later, I didn't know any of the story. So what happened was I'm sitting at home one day, and I have this amazing network of great friends around the world, and I'm very close to everybody. But somehow Paul slipped away because of this whole thing with Debbie, who is referenced in the documentary quite extensively. And I go, whatever happened to Bookman? I can't believe I let him get away. So I go online. Oh, he got remarried. That's great. Oh, he's still in his dental practice. And I sent an email to the dental practice saying, I need Dr. Bookman's home address so I can send him a wedding gift. And 5 minutes later, he's calling me. Now, we hadn't spoken in probably 20 years at this point. And, oh my God, I'm so sorry, blah, 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 blah. I said, let's have a Zoom call this Saturday and we'll catch up. Saturday comes along, we get on, and he talks first. And for 1 hour, I'm listening to what eventually becomes this documentary in disbelief. What these kids have been through, what he's been through. You can't write a script like this.
Right.
And at the end of our Zoom, when he was done and it was my turn, I said, Paul, I need to digest what I've just heard. What am I going to tell you? Yeah, everybody's great and healthy and wonderful. We got to do me another weekend, and we saved it for a week. But I was just completely blown away by the story that I heard. And the more I thought about it, sometimes I need to get hit in the head with a sledgehammer to realize we have a story idea here. And one day, months later, he posted a picture of Mark in his wheelchair. He was now full-time in a wheelchair, sort of a three-quarter perspective, and he had a jacket on. He looked kind of dapper. And I go, oh, my God, how did I not see the greatest story that's never been told? So I called Paul. What do you think? I think it's a great idea. Let's get Mark on a Zoom. Mark's in Tokyo, living full-time and teaching at the University of Tokyo, which is part of his story. He speaks fluent Japanese. Talk about brilliant. Get him on a Zoom. Okay, I'm interested. So for a whole year, every Wednesday night, my time, Thursday morning, Mark's time, I would call him in Tokyo when we would just talk about what this project should look like, what needs to be. It wasn't going to be about him. It was going to be about the work that he was doing in the disability community, because by now he was full-time in a wheelchair and dealing with all the machinations of accessibility and acceptance and all that stuff. And he was the rock star in that community. He was a global leader by this point. People recognized him, and wherever he went, things got better. I mean, that's how adamant he was to fix these problems.
At the end of the day, I'm sitting in Japan. I work as a historian at one of the nation's top universities. I consult for governments and corporations inside this country and across the world. I'm 31. I don't think many people can say that they're sitting in the position that I am, that they've had the opportunities that I have had, and that they have the ability or the chance to affect the lives of as many people as I've been privileged enough to do. And I recognize that that doesn't come from myself alone. It comes from a community that raised me, and one of the central figures of that community is sitting right next to me. I mean, Ron, of course. No.
Always a putz.
And Japan at the time when he moved out there he knew they were going to have issues with the aging population, and there weren't going to be enough younger people to take care of the disabled people. And I'm encapsulating.
You said aging, not Asian.
Aging, yes, aging. Yeah. So they were going to have a global or a country catastrophe at some point, because in Japan, if you're disabled now, it's come a long way, you can get caregivers at no charge, full-time caregivers that are supplied to you by the country. And Mark needed 24/7 care. And as a resident, he got 24/7 care. He couldn't function without it.
Mobility mainly?
Everything.
Everything,
Yeah. Oh, I mean, yes, mobility, but everything that you can imagine. And he was in a Mac Daddy wheelchair, and he could order food in restaurant. He couldn't cook. He couldn't do a lot of things. And over time, his mobility worsened. So when we decided, all right, let's do this project, and I'm bouncing around to lots of things, which you'll see in the documentary, COVID was still rearing its ugly head. It was the tail end of it. And we said, I don't know if we can get over, and Paul hadn't seen Mark in 3 years because the country had shut down. They had not been in each other's presence.
Paul, his father, hasn't seen Mark.
Yes, father's father, exactly. And anyway, as is evidenced again in the documentary, we finally got the proper documentation and got to Japan, and the gods were smiling on us because we had 2 weeks. We had just come in on a typhoon, and it just ended. 2 weeks of perfect weather. Everything went according to plan. And then another front came in, and we were so lucky in that regard. So this is where the story gets dicey, because we had a very specific vision in mind for this project, and I can't tell you how many hours of interviews with Mark and telling the story of disability, the history of disability. And we come back to the States. This is 2022, probably early October. And I had back surgery scheduled right here at Roper St. Francis. And thanks, Dr. Cuddy, I'm still walking around in beautiful shape. And so part of the recuperation is I had to lay down every once in a while. And this is now 6 weeks after we'd come back from Tokyo. And I'm laying on my bed, and I get a text. And you have to understand, Paul and I have a sense of humor with many of my college brothers that are Oh, you'd say, do you hate that guy? No, he's one of my best friends. Why? The hearing us talk. And I'm reading this text, and I go, Paul, this isn't funny even for you. And I realized it wasn't the joke. It was that Mark had just passed away at Tokyo. So this was 6 weeks after it happened, and we're, oh my God, this is a disaster. What are we going to do? And Paul, when he finally was capable of speaking, which was a long time afterwards, he goes, does this mean the project goes away? I said, no, on the contrary, it becomes more important and we need to get it out fast. And so we revamped and upgraded our efforts and completely changed the story. This was not the way it was supposed to be. Now it was all about Mark, but the impact of what he had done around the world, literally as a global leader of disability rights and education and acceptance and all that stuff. And I learned so much about him. The guy, he was a genius on every level because he had only his mind to work with. He was constantly writing. You know, when he died, he had more works attributed to him than somebody 3 times his age. He was 31 when he passed away. And his newest book just got released. It was published by Oxford University Press. And, you know, not to date the show, but there's an event coming up in Pennsylvania where they're going to announce the book. Just so you know, he had a bachelor's degree from Villanova, went to University of Pennsylvania where he got a master's and PhD, and then learned fluent Japanese and moved to Tokyo to become a professor at the University of Tokyo full time. So that's where he spent, and he was motivated by his love of manga and anime. And that's part of it was, as he says in the documentary, these were characters that had some disability, but through the magic of, you know, animatronics or whatever, they could function. And it was, to him, it was like, wow, this is speaking to me because it seems to solve that problem. I mean, again, broad brushing it, but that was his big impetus to move to Japan. And just him getting there was a fascinating study.
Yeah.
But to travel in his condition, that's a whole nother story, you know, you can imagine. And he was in what I call a Mac Daddy wheelchair that probably cost $25,000, but did everything that you could imagine. And that was his lifeline.
Yeah.
But, you know, the lessons that I learned, what did I know about disability before I did this project? And now I can't go anywhere without looking at accessibility and ramps and all this kind of stuff. And there was a great story that Paul and Mark, father and son, told once a few years before we were over there. Paul was visiting, and they were hungry. And it was kind of cold and blustery outside, and they started looking for a restaurant. And they passed 50 restaurants that were inaccessible to his wheelchair, even if they had a simple ramp, you know, a handheld thing. They could, nothing. It was the 51st restaurant they could finally get in and have a meal.
Gosh.
Yeah. So a lot of it is the indignity of being in that position.
Yeah.
But the one difference between the U.S., we have the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is a specific set of rules where you must build a building with these types of features and functions. That does not apply, however, to a historic building. If it's a certain age, you don't have to accommodate somebody with a disability. In Japan, it's considered a moral obligation. There's no law, because if it was, they would have to spend billions more accommodating. But a lot of stuff that Mark did in Japan was kind of shaming them into, yes, we need an elevator for the train. Yes, we need curb cuts over here. And the history of it started with blind people from World War II. And everywhere you go in Tokyo, they have these yellow things where the canes go in, and it allows them to steer their way. So the blind lobby was a huge disability lobby in Japan back since the 40s, and it's metamorphosized into maybe one of the most progressive countries in the world when dealing with disability.
Yeah. Well, what we'll do, with your permission, for folks that are listening, the 2 voices that you'll hear on this episode will be some clips from Mark, and then what's his sister's name again?
Rachel,
if that's okay with you.
Oh, absolutely.
And we'll have a link in the show notes so you can watch it in its entirety. And tell people exactly what their condition was.
They were diagnosed with something called glycogen storage disease type 4 rare variant. And for a while, it was so rare, maybe there were 8 cases in the world when they were born. It was so rare that they started calling it Bookman syndrome.
My parents, my mom and dad, they raised us as if we were not disabled. They held us accountable, and they wanted us to accomplish anything that we wanted to do.
Every day, I rely on a caregiver to help get me into my wheelchair. I drive it across my architect-designed apartment, take the medicine laid out by my nurse, go outside, follow a street path, get to a train station where I use a government-issued disability pass, where an attendant pulls out a ramp for me. I get to my destination, and there I rely on the relevant staff. Everywhere I go, no matter what I want to do, my life is entangled with the lives of 100 other people in 100 different specialties.
Mark described it to me as like for his heart, for example, or any muscle. Let's say your muscle's a sponge and it's wet, so you squeeze the water out. Now fill that sponge with marbles and try to squeeze the water out. And you can't, obviously. So it's very much like a Lou Gehrig's disease. It's a degenerative disease that over time you just lose all ability to use anything. And you know, for example, Paul noticed that he hadn't seen Mark in 3 years. We went out to have a beer one night, and Mark needed 2 hands to lift up the beer mug, whereas 3 years ago he could pick up the mug by himself with no problem.
Gotcha.
And there was a lot of time where he was perfectly mobile, but knew that it was coming, so he was able to prepare himself for the disability. But there's one other thing I should mention that was not in the documentary. When he was in the premature ward in Pennsylvania, it's an oxygen-rich environment. And if you know anything about premature births, a lot of times the oxygen-rich environment could either cause blindness, which it does quite a bit, or severe eye issues. And I asked him one day, do you have any eye issues? Oh, yeah. What is that like? He said, it's like looking through 2 paper towel rolls. He had no peripheral vision, only this sort of straight tunnel vision. And I'm thinking, how much more can they heap on this guy, for God's sakes, you know? I mean, and the one thing I asked him, and I think it's important to mention this, and then I'll shut up because I'm sorry I'm monopolizing.
We need this context for the rest of the conversation.
I asked him one day, you're a rock star, you're globally known, all these accolades. Would you give all that up to be out of the chair? And he said, no. He said, I know I was put on this earth for one purpose, you know.
Dang. Quite the perspective.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah. So you have become passionate about this through your friendship, obviously, with Mark and his father, and then making this documentary. You've been educated on it. And then we've brought these 2 guys because you guys are obviously passionate about this as well. And you want to give people just a quick summary with your journey. They need to go back to 148, but you've been a caretaker of your daughter.
Yes. We have an adult daughter who's 33 years old, who's mentally and physically challenged and has an active seizure disorder. And then we also took care of my mother-in-law through cancer and dementia.
Yeah.
And a big passion of mine is, in addition to accessibility and inclusion, is really trying to answer the question of what is it that's going to make the sea change. I just love that in Japan it's a moral obligation. It's not a litigious kind of thing. But what is it that the church can help people come to understand that's so important about people who seem needy, fragile, weak, vulnerable, whatever, but Jesus says they're the most important people in the room. And how do we make that mind shift and make it as humanity, not just what you believe as far as your faith, but as humanity? How do you get the world to see these people for who they truly are?
Yeah. Heart change.
Yeah.
So the ADA, if I were to open up a yogurt shop and didn't have, and the terminology universal access, is that the term for an environment where every business establishment is required to have accessibility for people?
The answer is yes. There's a certain minimal guideline you're supposed to follow. However, the message of the documentary is we need to go beyond that. And it's easy to do that if you start in the beginning instead of waiting till something is built and then trying to fix it.
Yeah.
Which is like putting a Band-Aid, on too late. And
so what would happen if someone came to the yogurt shop, they were in a wheelchair, couldn't get in, and let's say they were really bothered by it, and they called the authorities and just said, hey, this was just an unfortunate experience, took my daughter to her birthday, for her birthday, couldn't even get into the yogurt shop. Would the authorities come and say, look, you've got to do...
There would be a lawsuit. There would be a huge thing. Yeah, they would be forced to fix it because that's the nature of the law.
Yeah.
Rachel tells stories where was living in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania. She liked a cookie, like Crumble Cookies or one of those places, and she loved these cookies. But the only way for her to get in was through the back door next to the garbage can. That it was just the indignity of that. And she spoke to the owners, and they actually made amendments because of her. They wanted to fix the issues. But she also had a situation where, she was also brilliant, like Mark, but because she was relying on care from the state, she was not allowed to work. She couldn't work more than so many hours a week or she would lose her benefits, including the money they paid to retrofit her vehicle so she could drive. It makes no sense. Here's this incredible educated woman who was not allowed to work, basically forced to sit around. And so she applied for a job at it's a convenience store chain, Wawa, to work in their main headquarters up there. And she was going to work in the lab. She was a biologist by education, and she applied online. They gave her the job. So she shows up the next day, just wants to see the place where she's going to be coming for her interview. And it's a historic building. And she calls the office. Yeah, I'm in a wheelchair. How do I get in the building? Somebody will call you. She's in the parking lot. Nobody called. And she called back. Oh, he's left for the day. Now, that was a really cheesy way of handling it, of course, but that building was not obligated because it's a historic building predating whatever. They didn't have to retrofit it to accommodate people with disabilities.
And thus they could turn down her candidacy for that job?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, they didn't post it, no wheelchairs, no disabilities, but if you talk to some people, I mean, just the changes that have happened over the years with respect to people with disabilities, I've heard stories about people who wanted to be teachers, but the school board thought their wheelchair would be a safety impediment. And therefore, they were not allowed to first go to school, let alone teach. I mean, ridiculous. Yeah. Absolutely ridiculous. How do you say something like that to a person?
Yeah.
If you really want to get an education on top of our program, seek out a program called Crip Camp, which is the history of the disability movement. It's brilliant. And it's one of those programs that I would highly recommend. James, I forget his last name, he has multiple sclerosis, and he's the producer behind this. And it's a real great education about how the ADA came about and why, and the indignities these people were forced to endure before there was big change in government. People just didn't take them seriously. Mm-hmm. And you just scratch your head and go, I don't know. How do you talk to somebody like that? How do you not respond to that? Mm-hmm. And the numbers of the disabled in the global community are pretty significant.
Yeah. All right, one more logistical question, then I'm just going to be throwing questions out to all three of y'all and let y'all take over from there. But how far does the ADA take things? An example I thought of is someone who's hearing impaired. They want to take advantage of a tour guide at a museum, and they can't hear the tour guide. Could they say, "Hey, this is jacked up. I want to take part in this tour, and I can't hear what the person's saying"? You
would find in most places they do have facilities or the ability to do that. For example, when we first put this together, I asked all of the disabled people I'd worked with, what do we need to do to make sure we don't leave somebody out? The hearing impaired part was a big part of it, but also for blind, there's something called, of course, I'm going to forget this all of a sudden. It was where you get a voice, it's like a headset that will tell you what you're seeing on screen if you can't see. And I'm embarrassed that I can't remember the technology, but it's very commonplace now. And audio description, that's what it is. You find it on airplanes now. Delta Airlines has a whole section of audio description so that you're not seeing it and you'll hear a guy or a girl in between something, woman in blue dress sitting in a chair, mountainscape with a train going by, so you're knowing what the visual is even though you can't see it. It's very popular in movie theaters. In Japan, they have it as an app on your iPhone. So you can just plug it in and listen away. But those types of things are not as commonplace, anymore these days. And then the argument also is a lot of this stuff becomes commonplace for everybody. It may not be a wheelchair. What if you're pushing your baby in a baby carriage? You're going to use the ramp. What if you're carrying a bunch of books and you use the automatic door opener? Everybody uses it, not taking away from anything.
Exactly.
But do it now when you're first building it. Don't wait till it's done. Ooh, we should have done that.
Yeah, well, and the documentary was enlightening for me because, I guess I knew this, but to hear it said so emphatically, at any point in time, any of us could become a person with disabilities, and most of us will with old age. So it's a human deal here that we're talking. So, Mary, I want to start with you as far as the heart change is concerned. Kind of how I think about people's individual callings, like someone who is called to start an organization to stop human trafficking. They can't put their whole heart into that and put their heart into what we're talking about right now. So in other words, everybody has different callings of things that God's wired them up to focus on, but what's something that every single person on the face of the earth can take in when it comes to this discussion? And maybe we can just start with the church. If we proclaim, hey, that Jesus guy, I adhere to his teachings, like what should Christians be doing with this conversation? What's our responsibility?
Well, I think the part of the documentary that encased my thinking so much was the part where Mark said, I require people 24/7, right? And he needs somebody to prepare his meal and somebody to help him bathe and somebody to, he's pretty much was never alone. And I believe what I read in scripture is we are all connected. And that what we do to one, we do to all. And we do to ourselves. And it is Christ you serve. And so that whole thing about a person who is weak, vulnerable, disabled being from 1 Corinthians, the most indispensable member of a community, let alone a faith community, is because their vulnerability requires of us to give of ourselves, right? But we live in a humanity that has been listening to lies for so long that we think we are meant to be getting everything for ourselves. And yet, one of the largest messages of the gospel is kenosis, is giving yourselves away and considering other people first and foremost. It's not just for people with disabilities, it's how our Lord asks us to treat each other, no matter who they are. And so that's why this is so interesting to me, because I believe that people with disabilities are the ones, it's what our daughter did for us. I was a jacked up corporate woman and my husband was a jacked up corporate guy. And she required 24/7 from us and made us take the downward trip of life into a up is down, down is up economy, which is what Jesus teaches. And I believe that part where Mark was revealing that, everything he does, he needs help with. We all do. We all do. And it's a shift. And I don't care what your faith is. It's just a matter of us all being human beings on the planet together and being connected and helping one another and giving yourselves away. And I'll just say one more thing. If you look around at creation, again, whatever your faith is, you can't deny this. Everything was created to give itself away. the sun doesn't need vitamin D. Apples don't eat apple trees. Roses don't smell their perfume. Everything gives itself away sacrificially. And that's what we're called to do for each other, is to give ourselves away. I mean, even unto death. It's what being human is.
Right. Yeah. So a business owner who, and this was addressed in the documentary, who there's so much money to invest in such a small remnant of our population, even if that sort of train of thought was accurate. And I think we just kind of talked about why it's not. This is a humanity deal. But even if those sentiments were accurate, you would say, well, yeah, we have a responsibility. Put in the investment for people. They're the least of these. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's even like at a church, or it's anywhere. If you can love me when I'm a young man with autism and I'm biting myself and I yell out and I jump up and down during worship and I, do all those things, I cannot conform to the patterns of this world, which is what Jesus tells us not to do, not to conform. In meeting his needs, we begin to encounter our own brokenness, and compassion forms, and community forms, and connectedness forms. But right now, it's an inconvenience. Like you said, it's an expense, it's an inconvenience. And so we need to build the ramp, have a room over there, do this, do that. But where they are most needed is in community. This small number of people that nobody wants to invest a whole lot of money into because they don't. That was the other thing I loved about the documentary was they don't shop, but they go someplace with people who do.
Well, actually, the argument is it's a much larger community than you think. And the point is made that if you just cater to the disabled community, you're probably going to triple your business because you said they don't come by themselves. They come with an entourage who's eating and buying souvenirs and all that stuff.
And they end up staying longer because it takes them
Very
longer
good,
to
exactly.
go from point A to point B.
Right.
I am so proud that you watched.
You didn't believe me? I told you in the lobby I watched it. You were like, yeah, right.
So accommodating the least, even though their numbers are small and they don't make economic sense. I mean, we live in a historical city where we went from one church to another and we didn't figure it out until we went, oh, it's because you don't have to accommodate us because you're historical. Almost every church in town that we were going to were all historical.
That's true.
And the sidewalks, when my daughter's in her wheelchair, you can have all the cuts, off the curb you want, but once you get on that sidewalk, you can't navigate those broken, crumbly sidewalks downtown. And the city isn't going to fix that. I can't get her into Barnes & Noble and maneuver through, especially at Christmas time, through the aisles, because everything is so jam full of toys and books and all that kind of stuff. So, it's a whole mindset that I believe needs to shift, and that's what I'm so in favor of, is how do we just get people to see how much better life would be for all of us when we accommodate the most vulnerable?
I'll tell you what I struggle with is the concept of, and it makes me feel a little uncomfortable to even say these words, but feeling sorry for people with disabilities. It's always been, I don't know if you'd call it an issue for me, but I want to say it was Rachel in the documentary said that when we have sentiments like, I just can't imagine what you're going through, it makes an isolated population feel even more isolated. And so I'm throwing this out to all three of you. Would you say that it's a good rule of thumb to just not acknowledge one's disability, like in a conversation, unless there is a relationship established? Because obviously, if you're close friends with someone, you talk about everything. But if I'm sitting on the plane with someone and they have a noticeable disability, don't bring it up, right? I mean, because they're just a normal person.
If I may, so I've talked to people with disabilities who love when kids come up to them. What happened to you?
Yeah.
They have no problem. There's no filter. And they love to hear the explanation. There's nothing wrong with certainly a child doing something like that.
Sure.
And I think in a lot of cases, a person with a disability, unless you're obnoxious about it, I don't think they're going to have a problem with you asking. But in the same way, Rachel talked about, not in the documentary, she'll get out of out of the thing in her wheelchair, and she'll go fill up her car with gas. And somebody will come up invariably, "Oh, God bless you, you can fill up your own." And she wants to tell him, I'm really capable of doing this. You're insulting me by making such comments. But, she understands where that comes from. Or grabbing somebody who's blind and trying to help them across the street without asking them first. They'll tell you, I'm perfectly capable. I've been trained to do this. That's where there's sort of a line drawn with some of them, is that, don't assume. That's called ableism, I think, when you start assuming that everybody should, have that level of accessibility. But again, these are just stories that I've heard from people.
But is there a time, if I were to, and is it okay if people know that Rachel, that was before the documentary or after the documentary was done, she passed away?
When we would have these tough conversations, and I would be upset or sad or frustrated with the situation, Mark would check me, as he usually would, but he would do so in a way, especially these past few years, and he would say to me, like, to pretty much to check my privilege and look at this life that we live and how lucky we are to be where we are and to have what we have. And yeah, some things aren't great, but we still are able to speak and to use our voice and to advocate.
She did. It was 18 months after Mark. The story is we were having the premiere, the U.S. premiere. The first premiere was in Tokyo. The U.S. premiere was like June 29th, 2023, like a year and a half ago. And she was already not doing well. And she wanted to be there for Mark. Mark was already gone, obviously, and it was a great night. But you could tell she was in rough shape. So she went right into the hospital almost as soon as we were done. And several weeks later, encapsulating a long and awful, arduous story, they decided she'd had a setback, and she coded one night, and it took them like 4 hours to bring her back, but they put her on a heart-lung machine, which was not a sustainable way to live. And there was some issues with not getting her to the right hospital that could have taken a higher-risk patient, and that was a whole side story with the university up there. It's important to mention a lot of these hospitals that do transplants won't take a certain patient if they don't think they're going to survive, because they get their funding based on how many successful operations they had. And she was already, she already had a heart transplant, so getting a second one. Anyway, so they put her on a heart-lung machine and made the decision. Paul texted me, we're going to pull the plug on her at 9:00 tonight. I didn't know at the time that she was awake and conscious and part of that decision. This is what a hero she was. And when I found out, it blew me away. So she had a day to say goodbye to people. And she told Paul, make sure they take my liver and my kidneys, I think, organs that weren't affected by the neuromuscular disease. Like, this is the bravest thing I've ever heard in my life. And then she passed away.
Yeah.
I mean, again, you have to sit still and process this.
Right. Right. So I know everybody is different, and you can't just like any demographic of people, you can't lump everybody into the same category. But when it comes to someone like me, if I were to have seen Rachel at the gas station, I would want to just say, hey, need a hand? Like, I can tell you have a disability and this may be harder. And I'm even thinking, what if this person is like, can't people see that I could use a hand? And maybe gas station is a bad example because it would be obvious she's handling herself just fine. She's putting gas in her car. But if it was something where it's just like, I don't know if this person needs help. For me, it's something that I encounter regularly with elderly people, and I'm always hesitant. Like, is it a slap in the face? And I know it just depends on the person. Somebody would be like, oh, honey, thank you so much. I would love your help. And then other people would be like, what are you talking? I'm a stranger to you, and I don't need your help, sort of thing. You could get two different reactions. But how would you guys instruct me in how to carry myself just in day-to-day with strangers?
Go ahead, Mary.
Kindness is not a problem. If all you're doing is extending kindness and seeing another human being struggling and you offer help and they snap at you, that's their problem, not yours.
That's their problem, yeah.
I mean, they need to do emotional and spiritual work, right? Kindness is never a problem. I am so grateful all the time when people, and even if the kindness just begins with pity, hopefully it won't end with pity, and it usually doesn't when they encounter us, out in public. But kindness is never a problem, and if someone gets offended, that's their problem.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I would say the same thing. I think empathy goes a long way, and just remembering that these people are human beings and they value human connection just like we do. So I think that if you're entering an interaction with kindness, with empathy, with the intent to help and not to necessarily just pity that person, but to truly help them and truly have a positive human interaction, I think that's kind of the best way to navigate that.
Yeah. Would you say it would probably, and again, I'm asking us all maybe to put ourselves in someone else's shoes. Do you think it would be a breath of fresh air for someone who is very noticeably has a disability, and to strike up a conversation and to just emphatically ignore the disability and just talk to that person not look at their legs or whatever it is that you can see on the surface? That would probably be a breath of fresh air for people like that, to be like, that was awesome. I just had a real conversation and the person acted normal for once.
I could tell you that in the microcosm I was in, absolutely. Rachel will tell you she had all these friends when she was able-bodied, and with her disease progressing, very few of her friends stayed with her or would say, hey, let's go out to a place where we know Rachel can bring her wheelchair. That went away. And that was probably more hurtful than anything. And so her best friends of late were people who were also in wheelchairs or had a one place trained dogs, service dogs. So she became very close to these people. It's a shame that had to happen.
And I think I heard 15% of the human population are disabled.
That's significant, yeah.
15%. What are some forms of disability that maybe someone like me is not thinking of when it comes to that 15%? That would be hearing impaired, vision impaired, mobility impaired.
Mm-hmm.
There are, I think, hundreds of disabilities if you look at the classifications, and many of them, if you look at, Villanova has this great program where Greg Hanna is the head of the disability movement up there, and you look at a group picture, and there's maybe two people in a wheelchair, but all the rest of them have some disability of some sort. It may not be printed on their face, but they're all dealing with the same issues and whatever that might be. My daughter just, in her volleyball program up at college, there's a girl that has to have a service dog with her all the time. I don't know what her issue is, but that's how she has to deal with that, and accommodations had to be made, So there's so many levels of disability, I don't think you could lump them into one. The easy ones, of course, are mobility, hearing, and sight.
Yeah. And then would if I'm going down a list, is a safe terminology say mentally impaired? As far as is that safe terminology?
Or cognitively challenged.
Cognitively.
Or having an intellectual disability would also be a way to say that as well.
Yeah. And I actually had this conversation with someone recently. I think it was a friend where, we didn't have to be super careful with our words, and we were legitimately approaching this with respect and curious as far as our responsibility with how we talk about things. But is handicap, is that terminology of the past? And what someone brought up is there's still signs that say handicap parking.
Mm-hmm.
But I have tried to rid that from my vocabulary because it just kind of sounds not as honoring. What would you think, Mady?
Yeah, I don't really love the terminology.
Yeah.
I think saying that individual has a disability or has a physical disability is a lot more honoring.
Yeah.
That's what I would say.
Because when I was a kid, we just said mentally handicapped.
Mm-hmm.
That's just what we said. And at that point in time, I think it was more culturally acceptable. But yeah, it doesn't feel right to me.
Yeah, I would agree.
What do you think? Especially as someone who loves your daughter so dearly. I mean...
We've had so many people fumble so many things and, even use the R word,
Yeah.
which makes a lot of people cringe. But it's just, we're all human beings trying to get through this deal together. And I'm not going to flip out if somebody uses that word because that's all they knew, you know, or yeah, you've probably been living under a rock, but that's okay. I mean, I just feel that when we remove the fear factor of I did it wrong, I said it wrong, I offended you, I did something, now we're starting to act more like brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
We're starting to, and I can't tell you how many times the things that make us different are the things that bless each other so much. And learning patience and tolerance and love for someone else, regardless of how badly they fumble it, is kind of what we're all fumbling it. And that's what I love about having a church that has a special needs ministry.
Yeah.
That is so much saying, well, if they can love those people who are so visibly different, I think there might be room for me, because inside of all of our own hearts, we think we don't belong.
Absolutely.
You know?
Mm-hmm. So this is, once again, a question out of curiosity, not in any way pushing back on One by One Ministries, because it's obviously a great ministry. But how do you guys run the ministry without approaching it as this is a ministry for people with disabilities? Because we just got through saying how much of a variety of disabilities. So it's not like you can approach everybody that comes there to receive of that ministry. Every situation is different. So how do you guys approach that ministry with that in mind? Like you just can't approach everybody the same way.
Yeah, for sure. I think there is a lot of individuality within our ministry. We try really hard to love each child and student and adult in our ministry with an individual love. So with whatever accommodations they need to be successful and to have a great time and to feel loved at church. So I think it takes a lot of care from our volunteers and from everyone involved in our ministry to approach each person in our ministry as an individual, because there's so much nuance with disability, like we've all been talking about. If you know one person with a disability, you just know one person with a disability. And everybody is so different, has different needs, has a different background, has different things that would make their experience at church more successful, more fun, ways that they would feel loved. Just like we all have love languages, or we have ways that we feel loved, or we feel supported in different environments. All of the kids and the students and the adults in our ministry do too. So I think it just takes a lot of intentionality to get to know those kids, to get to know the families, having a lot of parent discussions with how can we support your kid? How are they supported in other environments at school or whatever they do in their week?
Yeah.
And figuring that out.
Yeah. So any given Sunday, you guys could have all ages in taking part in your ministry as participants.
Yeah. So in our one by one room currently, our oldest guy that attends regularly is 30.
Okay.
But we do have kids in our ministry as young as nursery age. In our room, I think our youngest person is 4, I believe, right now. But I do help provide some support to students or to kids in nursery age as well. But yeah, we don't currently have a cutoff with age, just because we have some friends in the ministry that have been in the ministry since it started 15 or 20 years ago. And we do our best to accommodate them and to love them in the ways that they feel the most love.
Is there ever a time when, out of making a decision for everyone's safety, you have to say, hey, we can't accommodate you today, but give us a week and we'll be ready for you next week? Like, does anybody ever come to One by One and you're like, I'm so sorry, we don't have the resources or the personnel, but we'll be ready for you next week?
So I've only been on staff for a few months. What I will say is we haven't had to do that yet.
Yeah.
I have a really awesome team of people that show up weekly or as much as they can to serve this ministry, and I'm so grateful for them. We have people that have experience with people with disabilities, but also just people that have learned to love this population and are so passionate about this population. I'm so grateful for them. And we haven't had to do that yet.
Yeah.
We've been able to accommodate. We have So we have our classroom and we have a sensory room that is so helpful for some of our students with higher needs if they need a break from the typical classroom environment. And yeah, we've been able to accommodate so far everyone that has come. I've been grateful that some families will reach out like midweek and say, hey, we're going to come to church on Sunday. And that gives me some time to make sure that we have the proper volunteers in place and the supports in place to support those families.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you say there would be a situation in which that would be the wisest decision and just ensure the person will be ready next week?
Yeah, that's
For
so
sure.
great. Wow, that you've got families doing that for you. And the other
Yeah,
thing
for
that's so
sure.
beautiful is that you've cultivated people who love this population.
Yes, I'm so
And
grateful for them.
You really are, because I think that's probably one of the hardest things. And when I was listening to Mark talk, is finding people who want to be a village with you and your
Absolutely.
family, and having
Yeah.
somebody that just says, "Come on, we are so excited to see you," is such a rare thing. And how beautiful that this community has been able to provide so many people who say, "Yes, we want to be a part of your family or your experience here."
Absolutely.
That's something.
So
Yeah,
anybody
it's
can
really
volunteer.
Yes, everyone is background checked and anyone can volunteer. They don't have to have experience necessarily with individuals with disabilities. And because a lot of our kids that come to our ministry or students or adults, they just want people to love them and hang out with them. And we do have students and adults with higher needs, and that may require some additional training just for safety. But we have several students that just come and want to feel loved and want to talk about their preferred interests or want to hang out and participate in a preferred activity or worship together. I kind of mentioned this earlier, but worship in 1 by 1 is one of my favorite parts of the week. It is so cool how these individuals worship. I think we get stuck, I think, just as people in comparison and worrying about what's going on next to me. What is my neighbor doing better or worse than I am? But I think of Hebrews 12, where it talks about running our race and throwing off everything that hinders us and fixing our eyes on Jesus. And I think that's something that I've observed that individuals with disabilities in the church and just in the world do so well, is focusing not on what their neighbor is doing, but just on themselves and in a time of worship or at church, on Jesus. And that is so beautiful to witness and something that I've been super blessed by.
Yeah. Well, thank you for what you do. Ron, why don't you tell us about the Mark Bookman Foundation?
Well, we knew that there had to be more to the story, and that originally it started as something that Mark came up with. We were in Japan, and he goes, "I want to start a foundation." And Paul said, "All right, what are you talking about?" He wheels himself into his bedroom, comes back 10 minutes later with something called GLIDE, the Glide Fund, Global Leaders in International Disability Education. Wow. And his idea was to find funds to give to disabled college students to travel internationally, to learn and to teach and bring that information back, which is exactly how he got started. He had a number of grants and scholarships that took him back to Japan, and it made a lot of sense. Well, after he passed away, we realized we really need to call this the Mark Bookman Foundation, and it needs to be a much bigger in scope foundation than it is. And as you will know from conversations with our friend Ann Lee, it took a lot of time to come up with the right, pathway. And we're so excited to be working in that space. And there's a lot of need for what we're teaching and offering out there. And I'm just delighted and very honored to be a part of all this.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we'll have information on that foundation in the show notes as well. And if you guys have anything that you didn't chime in on that you wish that the conversation would have gone toward, y'all speak up now, because we're going to wrap this up. Thank y'all so much to have such a well-rounded group of people that are all passionate about this on such a important topic. It's great to be in this seat to just learn from you guys. So thank y'all.
I'm honored to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks
And
for
to
having
be
us,
with
Joey.
you two has been
And thanks for
tremendous.
having these conversations.
Yes.
Really terrific.
So needed.
Yeah.
So thank you for having us.
Awesome.
You've been listening to the Things You Won't Hear on Sunday Seacoast podcast. In the show notes, you'll see a link to our Facebook group page. Also, we'd love for you to consider subscribing so you get these episodes downloaded right when they come out. Thanks so much for listening.